Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for this month's Ask Devex event, which is a special event as part of our Skills for Tomorrow initiative. I'm Emma Smith, Senior Careers Reporter here at Devex. Kate Warren will unfortunately not be able to join us today, so I'm going to be filling in for her and I will be moderating today's event instead. Before I introduce today's guest speakers, I'd like to do a quick sound check to make sure everyone can hear me. If you can hear me, please type yes into the chat box below. If you want, you could also take this time to let us know where in the world you're from or where you are based and working from at the moment. It's just nice to get a sense of where our audience is joining us from. Okay, great. Looks like everyone can hear me. And yeah, I see a very international audience today, which is great. If, however, you do have any technical problems during the webinar, you can send a message through the chat box on the bottom left-hand corner of the ReadyTalk window, and one of my colleagues will assist you. So today's Ask Devex is the second online event this week as part of our 2018 Skills for Tomorrow initiative. Along with our 5 partners for this event, we, over the course of the week, will be exploring the skills which professionals need for a successful career in global development, and sharing tips for how you can go about developing these skills and keeping up with the changing talent demands of the sector. If you haven't already done so, I would encourage you to check out the Skills for Tomorrow website using the link which we just posted in the chat box below. We have a lot of great content there, including op-eds from industry experts and advice on everything from how to learn new and emerging skill sets to tips on the best ways to actually learn new skills. So today we're very excited to have with us not one but 2 special guest speakers who will be on hand to help answer your career questions. First we have Dr. Shubha Kumar, who is an Assistant Professor on Global Health and the Director of the online MPH program with the University of Southern California. Also joining us today we have Ben Brockman, who is the Senior Manager at ID Insight and based in Washington, D.C. Shubha and Ben will both be answering your questions today and sharing their insights on what skills are most in demand, particularly in the areas of global health and monitoring and evaluation. Shubha and Ben, thank you so much for joining us today, and it's great to have you both with us. Before we get started with the Q&A, it would be great perhaps if you could both take a minute or two to tell the audience a little bit more about your background and your areas of expertise. Shubha, I'll pass it over to you first.
Great, thanks Emma, and hello to everybody today. We appreciate you being here. So my name is Shubha Kumar, and I work in global health as a professor at the University of Southern California at the Institute for Global Health, and I also direct our online Master of Public Health program, as well as other educational initiatives within the university. In terms of my background, I have worked in both the private and public healthcare spaces, both in Los Angeles and overseas a little bit. And really my passion has been working with international humanitarian NGOs. So before academia, that was where I spent most of my time. And then what I kept noticing with the NGOs that I was working with and kind of with the field more broadly was the difficulties we were having in demonstrating impact and really how to monitor and evaluate our programs. And so that's what led me to go back to school and pursue a doctorate degree in public health, where I focused my research on monitoring and evaluation approaches within global health and development, and stumbled across a method called social return on investment analysis, which I found particularly relevant to the field. And that's where I've done most of my research and a little bit of consulting as well. And would be happy to share more about my experience or attempt to answer any questions as helpful. And with that, I will pass it over to Ben.
Yeah, great. Ben, if you could give us a little intro as well.
Great. Thanks, Shubha, and thanks to Devex for inviting me to join today and to speak with you. As was mentioned, I'm coming from ID Insight. I'll just spend a minute talking about what ID Insight does and a bit about my professional background. So ID Insight's a nonprofit that works with other nonprofits, governments, geographies, everything from public health to agriculture to education to water and sanitation to vocational training and beyond. And we primarily work in South Asia, in India, and Sub-Saharan Africa, where we have 4 offices in Kenya, Zambia, South Africa, and Senegal. I'm in a small 3-person office based in DC, but the vast majority of our staff are based in Asia and Africa. And through our consulting work with nonprofits and governments and other organizations, we provide a series of rigorous research and data analytics services to help clients better deliver programs to their beneficiaries. It's everything from doing randomized control trials in a lean and relatively rapid time frame as a consulting service to setting up data monitoring systems to help organizations track how their programs are being rolled out and managed, to helping organizations think through what's the evidence that they should be considering when they embark on new programs. So I currently sit on our innovation team where I'm a senior manager that helps develop the new service offerings that ID Insight is starting to test out and will be expanding in the future, and predominantly focus on building out our advanced analytics and machine learning business vertical. And we're very excited about that. We think it has a lot of potential to drive social impact in addition to being just sort of a hot topic in public policy more generally. So the types of questions we're using these types of tools to answer are which children might be dropping out of school or at highest risk of dropping out of school, or which patients are most likely to be readmitted to a hospital or to be lost to follow-up in a healthcare system, or which individuals going through a vocational training program would be best suited to different labor market opportunities. So these are the types of questions I'm working on now as I build out a team at ID Insight to do this. I've been at ID Insight since 2012, based both in Asia and Africa, and now currently in the U.S. And happy to be here today to talk a little bit about that experience and answer any career questions you have on the monitoring and evaluation space. Thanks a lot.
Great, thank you to you both for those introductions. I'm sure our audience will have a lot of questions for you throughout this event. We do have a few which have been sent in already, so I think we should get started on those. But I do encourage our audience to keep sending their questions in via the chat box below, and we will get to as many as we can today. Okay, so today's first question, one of our participants writes that they want to improve their marketable global public health skills, but are not sure how to work towards achieving this goal. They're also currently taking time out to look after their younger children, so they're looking for something on a part-time basis. Now, this person says they are gravitating towards data analysis, monitoring and evaluation for program impact. So they ask, what would you recommend for someone in their position? They wonder if it's worthwhile to spend years doing part-time volunteer work, or is it wiser to invest their time working towards a degree or a certificate? And they also wondered if there are any online communities specific to health professionals where they could get advice from other people who are already working in this field. Shubha, I'll pass it over to you to start.
Sure. To be honest, I think largely my suggestion as far as that question is that it would depend based on your previous experience and or education. So if you don't yet have a master's level degree, then it may be worth pursuing a master's degree at this time. There are lots of flexible options nowadays with online and hybrid programs if you're not necessarily in a position to go on campus. However, if you already have a master's degree and you've been working in the field for some time, definitely volunteering part-time or a part-time internship or some form of work is good. I mean, you for sure want to stay engaged in whatever capacity you can, whether that's through work or volunteering or pursuing higher education. But it would really depend on your previous level of work experience and or education. If you have if you're happy with the amount of education that you have, and really you don't have enough work experience or enough work experience in a particular area that you're trying to enter, then certainly volunteering or paid work experience will be helpful. But it really depends on your particular case, and I'd be happy if you would like to reach out to me. I'd be happy to give you my 2 cents at a more personal level, if helpful.
Great. Okay. Ben, any thoughts?
I agree with Shubha on this one, that I think it really makes sense to pursue some kind of advanced degree if you don't already have one. But it's going to be pretty context specific to someone's current education, and whether perhaps in undergrad someone had already studied related topics. So, yeah.
Okay. So next we have a question. One of our members is asking, what is the best way to prepare for and demonstrate expertise in big data? So this person feels that this is one of the big buzzwords of development nowadays, and something that's particularly valuable for working in health-related fields. Ben, why don't we start with you this time?
Sure. So I'm going to broaden the question a little bit beyond just big data to a broader suite of concepts. I would include in that machine learning, artificial intelligence, just sort of advanced programming to make predictions, and also manage data. So there's a couple key skill sets here. One is becoming familiar with managing large volumes of data and being able to work with databases. So the specific skills that are useful for that are things like learning SQL, which is a database language, and then more on the application side of, like, once you're familiar with working with that data, being able to do something with it, build predictions, build software around it, and that you might want to look at different programming languages like Python or R. I'd say the 2 best ways to acquire these types of skills are through online courses. Coursera and related platforms have a ton of free or very cheap courses now to learn some of these new data skills. And so I think that's a great place to start to get your hands dirty at first. And then second is a lot of this work and being able to do it well professionally just requires practice in working with actual data sets, solving actual problems that go beyond what you find in a homework problem from an online course or at a university course. So that would be my second recommendation, is to find either pro bono volunteer work to do or participate in some of the competitions that are out there to do this type of work. There's a platform called Kaggle that sometimes the World Bank or other folks will host competitions on that allow people to test out their skills in this area. So that's how I'd recommend getting started. There's a lot there.
Great. Shubha, do you have any thoughts on building expertise in big data?
Yeah, I would just echo what Ben said as far as courses, and there are also master's degree programs related to big data, whether in computer engineering departments or business schools. So depending on the level of expertise a person is seeking to gain, different options may make sense.
Great, okay. And yeah, I think we'll try and post a couple of links to the courses that you mentioned there, Ben. Okay. So our next question is looking more at careers in M&E. Specifically, what skills are most sought after by employers in terms of non-technical skills for M&E work? And how should professionals go about developing these skills? Shubha, why don't we start with you this time?
Sure. In my experience, this is going to sound kind of generic, but honestly, people skills are the most important skills. So if we're talking about non-technical skills, aside from basically data analytics and reporting, as well as research methods, then you want to be able to really talk to people, whether it's through doing the interviews as part of your M&E work, or being able to present those results. Good people skills, presentation skills, communication skills would be key.
Great. Yeah, that's actually something I've heard from M&E professionals quite often. You don't just have to be able to present data in a report, but actually stand up and present it in front of people more times than not. Ben, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would take that sort of one step further and say one thing that's I think really important is for people who have the technical skills already, the non-technical skill that is most useful is to be able to take the technical jargon and concepts and really simplify or clarify them to a non-technical audience. So this is a lot of times when you're working with a senior bureaucrat or the leader of a nonprofit, they might have some general idea of the research in their area of expertise. The chances are that they were not themselves at any point a monitoring and evaluation professional. So being able to distill complex research topics and the trade-offs or uncertainties that underlie the research, I think is a really, really important skill for people doing monitoring and evaluation work, but does rely on having a technical underpinning to begin with.
Okay, great. So next, one of our participants writes that they are looking for a master's degree or an online degree that will help them in working in monitoring and evaluation for development programming. This person is looking to deepen their understanding and knowledge of practices for results-based evidence and learning for sustained impact. So do you have any advice for what kind of master's or online courses they should look for that will be most helpful for them? And perhaps I would add, if you also know of any other short-term courses or certifications which might be helpful for others who are looking to develop this knowledge, but maybe without going back and doing a master's. So Shubha, let's start with you. Sorry.
Sure. I'm aware that there are a few master's level programs in M&E. I believe Jimma University has one in Ethiopia, and there are a few in the U.S. as well. If I recall correctly, it might be Claremont that has one, Claremont Graduate University, and I'm blanking on a few of the others. But there are master's level degrees in this if you want to search online, and then there are quite a few certificates. If you just kind of do a quick Google, you'll be able to find them. I know USC at the Institute for Global Health, we are in the process of developing an online certificate in monitoring evaluation. So you may want to check back with us in about a year's time if you're interested in that. But there are a lot of resources and kind of online trainings as far as degrees as well. So I would just do a search. Sorry, not much more to add there.
Great. No, that's great. And Ben, have you any thoughts?
The only specific program I would plug is at MIT and the JPAL, the Poverty Action Lab there. There's a MicroMasters. I'll share it in the chat now. I'm not sure if I can send it to broadcast to all. Here we go. There's a MicroMasters that I believe is 5 or 6 courses that does a lot of the fundamentals of monitoring and evaluation, especially from a experimental perspective. And some of my colleagues that were formerly at JPAL worked on those, and I think they're a pretty high quality resource.
Okay. Ben, if I could just add to that, if you were, for example, looking to hire someone to work in an M&E position, are there any other degrees which they might not be specific to M&E, but that you would be able to tell that person would have a good grounding of the skills to work in M&E, for example, in research or statistics?
Yeah, for our entry-level positions, we generally look for people who have a broad base of quantitative skills. So that can be someone who's done an economics degree or math or statistics or some kind of other quantitative social science. We also hire engineers, people who have worked in the hard sciences. So we may be a little bit of an outlier in this space in that for people with the quantitative ability, we will do the in-house training on the specifics of monitoring and evaluation in particular. But it's great if someone can walk in the door with those skills already, either acquired through a internship or other practical experiences. So I think if you're working at an organization that does exclusively M&E work, there can be more professional development resources or other people in the office that can help with sort of the industry-specific knowledge. So you might be okay coming in with just a strong quantitative background. Whereas if you're being hired as the M&E person at a small to medium-sized organization, you're probably not going to have as much support in learning those skills on the job. So it's more useful to get those skills other places before applying.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So next, another question on degrees, this time specifically looking at the value of online degrees. So this member of the audience wonders how widely accepted are online courses, for example, those offered by Cornell or Coursera, and do hiring managers really value these online qualifications? So Shubha, maybe we can start with you, and then Ben, if you can weigh in and tell us your point of view as a hiring manager.
Sure. I would start off by saying it's really important to note the distinction between online courses versus online degrees. There are a lot of courses, there's MOOCs, massive open online courses out there, as well as, just a single course you could take at a university versus an entire degree program. And then there's large variations in the quality of online courses and online degrees. So it depends, again, at the level that you're trying to gain, the level of knowledge. If you just want to kind of brush up or get an introduction to an area, an online course may be sufficient, like a MOOC or even just a single course, but it's not going to give you necessarily in-depth skills or training, which you may need to pursue a degree for. And with that said, I would highly suggest you do your research as far as the quality of the online programs or degrees that you're looking at, because I've seen online programs ranging from, where they just basically record their on-campus program. There's a video at the back, and they basically watch a secondhand version of an on-campus program versus online programs that are really designed for working professionals with the online student in mind. So you certainly want to do your research and make sure that any online program you are going to enroll in has real interaction with faculty at the institution that you're looking at. You certainly want to pay attention to all the quality indicators, and whether it's from a reputable school and institution or not. In my experience, we launched the online program at USC about 6 years ago, and at that time, it was kind of around that time was the first time that quote unquote the good big schools were getting into online education as far as the type of tier of schools. And we've seen a lot of variation, and over time, certainly there's a lot of acceptance. I know our students have frankly never had an issue because we provide the same degree as an on-campus degree. It's the same courses, same faculty, it just happens to be in the online format. So the degree itself says Master of Public Health. It doesn't say whether you took it online or on campus. And so it really does not, we haven't had any issues so far. I do know in certain countries, though, online degree programs are not accepted. So based on where you are, you need to look into that. But generally speaking, I think there's a lot more appetite and understanding for online degree programs, particularly from reputable institutions. I'll leave it at that and pass it over to Ben.
Yeah, I would say we haven't had a ton of applicants come through our applicant pool that their primary advanced degrees are from some type of online program. I'd say what's more common to see is that people have done a handful of Coursera courses in a specific area that they want to, that they have an interest in or they want to build skills in. And I look as someone hiring, I look upon that pretty favorably, particularly if when you go into more detail, they have clearly absorbed the content from those courses, because I think it shows that the applicant is self-directed and self-motivated to learn and acquire new skills. So I think in general, just the state of online education in the field is that in most cases it's not going to replace a in-person degree, but for someone who has a bachelor's and wants to build skills or some kind of master's program and wants to build additional skills, I think it can be quite valuable and a cheaper and easier way to acquire new skills rather than doing a whole new program.
Great, thank you both. I think a lot of good points there to help professionals kind of weigh up whether the best thing for them is an online course or an online degree or a master's degree. So, okay, next we have a question on careers in public health. What advice do you have for someone who has experience working as a health practitioner in program delivery, but who is now looking to move and learn the skills which will allow them to play a bigger role in the design and planning of health programs and in influencing the wider health strategies? Shubha, let's start off with you for this one.
Sure. So if you've been working as a health practitioner primarily, but you're looking to kind of have impact on a broader or larger scale, if you are looking to pursue further education, then a master's in public health, a master's in public administration, master's in health administration, all of those may be potential routes for you, depending on what you're really looking to specialize in. So if it's program planning and monitoring evaluation, particularly in a global health context, I would suggest an MPH. If you're looking more for health administration as far as hospital administration and clinic administration in the U.S., an MHA degree may be useful. So you would want to kind of take a look at the different types of degree programs that are available. Well, they're all available, but in terms of what may be most relevant to your desired skills. And then if you're not necessarily interested in pursuing further education, just trying to land a job in that space. You know, if you're already a health practitioner, the good thing is you have obviously clinical experience and working with patients. And so being able to try to land a job or even a part-time, internship or volunteer opportunity that allows you to practice those skill sets could be useful.
Great.
Yeah, I don't have much
to...
Yeah, I don't have much to add on this one. Shubha is the health expert amongst us. But yeah, that makes sense from my experience as well.
Okay. Great. Then Ben, maybe let's start with you for this next question. Do you have any advice on what are the most useful softwares to learn for health-specific M&E work? The person who wrote this in has noted SPSS, which I think is one of the more common ones, but do you have any suggestions for other programs and maybe those which are more helpful for different types of health work?
Yeah, so I mean, SPSS is sort of the industry standard right now for most people doing epidemiology work. But across fields, not just public health, but in economics and social science disciplines, I think there's a general push towards programming languages that are open source. So Python and R are growing much more rapidly than SPSS or Stata are, and they're just much more accessible. More people are building more resources and packages, so they haven't completely taken over the industry yet, but I think they are moving towards becoming the industry standard, because it's what a lot of folks in the private sector are using, and as a result, the resources that go along with it are being developed much more rapidly than the more traditional niche software. So if I was to learn one right now, I would learn either R or Python. If you're doing epidemiology work right now, probably R. But yeah, it's a toss-up.
Great. And Shubha, maybe if you could share your thoughts and also mention if any of these are covered in the online MPH program. Does that involve, learning some of these softwares?
Yes, the online MPH program does involve learning several of the softwares, R, SAS, data, but I would also just add learning the softwares for qualitative analysis, so Qualtrics and others, survey methods. So there's quite a few softwares that are certainly relevant to M&E from kind of start to finish. And honestly, there's a lot you can do with things like Google Forms that don't necessarily require specialized expertise. So it depends, again, on kind of what space you're working and what point in the M&E cycle that you're working in. But yeah, you certainly need to be familiar with various types of software, from surveying to analytics, and then data visualization as well. That's really key. I think Ben mentioned it before, in terms of being able to report and making that communication really accessible to people and communicating to a lay audience, and also the cultural humility aspect, making sure that you're communicating ways that are sensitive to the context that you're working in. So also just learning Excel for that matter, and how to present, how to make great graphs. So there are lots of softwares that are going to be useful, and we do teach many of them in the online MPH.
Great, thanks for that, Shubha. Okay, so the next question is looking a bit more generally at transitioning into global development careers. This person has 30 years experience in engineering and construction, and they speak 4 languages. They've managed major projects and international projects in 20 countries, so they've worked in a lot of different cultural contexts. They're looking to transition into global development and are finding it challenging given that they don't have specific international development experience. So do you have any advice for people in this position who are looking to make that career transition? Perhaps any tips on how they can build their network or land consulting or part-time assignments, as a way to get their foot in the door? Ben, why don't we start with you on this one? I think also one of our audience earlier asked how you actually started in your career and landed your first job, so maybe you could start with that.
Sure. So I got lucky to get my start at ID Insight. I didn't have much of a monitoring and evaluation background going in. I, in undergrad, did international relations as a major and a minor in mathematics. So I had a quantitative background, but didn't have a strong research, monitoring, and evaluation background going in. And I sort of learned the skills on the job. For the individual whose background you described, it can be hard to transition into the sector sort of mid-career, especially if you're coming from something completely different. So my advice would be to try and find something in the sector that is most similar to what you're currently doing, but just in a different context. So if you have experience in engineering and construction, maybe looking at organizations that do infrastructure projects, so like Engineers Without Borders type of organizations, or potentially try and do some consulting work for a multilateral like the World Bank, or someone that has big, or Millennium Challenge Corporation, or a national government or provincial government who is implementing large infrastructure projects, rather than trying to change sectors and change skill sets all at the same time. So that would be my recommendation for that individual. I have a bit of a bias at ID Insight because we're a pretty quantitatively focused organization. And I would say that just building the technical skills, if you want to move into monitoring and evaluation, is pretty important up front. And it does, for the most part, require some sort of baseline aptitude in quantitative work if you want to pursue that part of monitoring and evaluation and research. So I think there is a lot of value in developing those core skills and then trying to find a opportunity that allows you to get hands-on experience.
Great. Shubha, have you any thoughts on how transitioning professionals can build that network or make those initial moves to land their first job in the sector?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm stating the obvious, but in terms of just making sure that your resume really highlights the transferable skills that you have, because obviously you've been working for some time and you've got those skills, but just making sure that it's very easy to the reader to be able to see how those skills, what those skills are, and therefore they could apply those in the sector. And theoretically, just knowing the type of skill set that you have. A lot of times people don't highlight that in their resumes, and that's what I've noticed. So they're doing themselves a disservice where they focus on the particular job or sector that they work in, but they're not actually highlighting, making upfront, these are the skills that I have, which are the most important and will allow you to move between any sector. The second thing, again, having a profile on LinkedIn, making sure you're connecting through your LinkedIn and social media connections, you're following people who are doing the type of work you want to do, and trying to reach out and have those connections. Honestly, I find Devex really helpful personally. I had a career account on Devex and subscribed to their events, and so you may already be doing all these things, but that's kind of what I would suggest, if not.
Great. I think that's great advice, and especially what you said about making sure you're translating your transferable skills, because I think in global development, we use a lot of specific keywords and phrases which maybe don't really apply to other sectors, so making sure you're transferring those skills. Yeah. Okay, Ben, next we have a question for you, actually. It's asking about, when you talked earlier about introducing data analysis and machine learning tools, so someone's asking if you're looking to introduce those in partner countries. Do you work with local IT firms and business analysts, and what kind of skills you're looking for those kind of roles?
Yeah, so I'll preface this with saying this is a pretty new vertical at ID Insight, so we only have a handful of projects in this space. Currently, we are doing most of the work in-house, and then we contract out small parts of the technical work that we don't have an internal expertise on to consultants. But I think the long-term vision is to, for the most part, have most of the core capabilities in-house to do that. So we'll be hiring some full-time data scientists that can do the development of algorithms, and data cleaning and building and predictions. And then we are also likely to hire some more folks with a full-stack software development toolkit to turn some of these algorithms into software products that a client can use in their day-to-day work. So currently, we're getting by here and there with some consultants in our network that we're friendly with, but over the long term, I think it's going to be done more in-house.
Great, thanks for sharing more on that with us. So yeah, next we have a question from someone who is thinking of going back to do a master's to help them in their global development career. They're wondering whether a master's in a more general subject like global development will be of more value, or if they should look at doing something more specific, such as data science or a health degree. So Shubha, maybe you could talk a bit about the value of a more specialized degree, and then Ben, maybe share your insights as a hiring manager, how you would view those two masters differently.
Sure. This is something I feel really strongly about, actually, is that it's critical to get degrees in hard skills rather than necessarily a general breadth, particularly at the master's level. You know, depending on what you want to work in specifically, whether that's public health, whether that's M&E, or, you know, data science, you really want to pursue a degree that gives you those skill sets rather than the foundational knowledge necessarily, because in my experience, when it comes to hiring, when it comes to looking for jobs, you really want to see that people have skills. They will certainly pick up the knowledge and the context within, you know, when they're learning those skills or when they're applying those skills, particularly in new contexts, but certainly vote for hard skill degrees rather than something more general.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. And I would say the only thing I would add to that is when thinking about, okay, should I do a master's in something like data science, or should I do like a public policy master's and take a data science course or a couple data science courses? If those are your two options, I think it depends on how you want to proceed in your career. Either way, I think, as Shubha said, you should really focus on building hard skills. But you can approach that with different intensities or different levels of concentration. So if you are interested in doing very technical work over the long term and being like the go-to data scientist, and your title is like data scientist at a organization or a company, then you should probably do the data science master's. If you are interested in being able to do a bit of this work and then maybe move into more of a business development role where you're building the partnerships with the people who are doing the more technical masters or PhDs, then I think it is worth considering doing a public policy degree that just then has a couple of classes where you focus in on these more technical skills. I think either way, it's very important to build the skills, but it has to do, that decision hinges more on whether you want to be the very technical person over the long term, or you want to build some expertise, but want to be a more generalist in the medium to long term.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So this next question touches a little bit on some of the points that we've covered already, but one of our members writes that they have a background in journalism and more qualitative research, and they've used NVivo, but they're looking to kind of apply to broader M&E roles. So they're wondering if they're going to be held back by their lack of background in stats and quantitative data. How realistic is it for them to be able to land an M&E role? So Ben, maybe we could start with you. I know you mentioned earlier that you do, some professional development in-house. How would you look on a candidate who comes from a more qualitative research background?
Yeah, so we definitely value folks that have a qualitative background. We do have a couple qualitative specialists in-house as well. But we are, and this is specific to ID Insight rather than, I think, the norm for the industry. So I don't want to speak on behalf of the industry overall, that the quantitative skills are sort of the bread and butter of the work we do. So we are looking for baseline core competencies, so people who don't run away from a spreadsheet and are comfortable just manipulating numbers and drawing inferences from them and do so quickly and accurately as a baseline skill. And then we can build some of the more industry-specific on the job skills of like how you design an experiment, or how you implement a survey, or how you analyze specific types of survey questions. So we're not necessarily looking for people to come, particularly for our entry-level positions, in with those skills, but we are looking for the more solid, just building block skills.
Great. And Shubha, actually, I'm not sure if maybe you want to talk a bit about the online MPH. Does it focus on both quantitative and qualitative data skills, and how easy is it to kind of move from one of those backgrounds to the other?
Sure. Actually, I want to echo what Ben said. Most of the M&E positions that I've looked at really do have a focus on quantitative skills. So it would be good to have at least a little bit of familiarity in that area, even if it's not something you're keen to develop an expertise in. Qualitative skills, of course, are valued and part of M&E. So do I think you'd be held back if you don't have deep expertise in quantitative skills? No. Personally, I'm not great at quantitative stuff. It's not my forte, but it's not been a problem because I've typically worked in teams as far as the monitoring and evaluation work that I've done. So it also depends on the context of where you're looking to work, because if you're going to be kind of the sole M&E officer responsible in the organization and you don't have a team to be working with, it's pretty critical to have both sets of skills. But let's say you were working with a team of other people, you may be fine focusing on the qualitative aspects of the work and somebody else handling the quantitative, which is, frankly, typically been my experience. To answer your question, Emma, in terms of online MPH, yes, we actually do focus on the quantitative skills. We do teach a little bit on the qualitative skills as well, and we have elective courses in that area. But the focus has been primarily on the quantitative.
Okay, that's great. Thank you both. So yeah, Ben, this next question is perhaps more one for you. The person writing here says they finished their first consultancy gig with Devex on a project in Nigeria in February of this year, but have since found it very difficult to get another job. And they feel that employees are very much focused on the years of experience that a candidate has instead of that person's character or enthusiasm to learn. So maybe you can speak a bit, first of all, about why, generally speaking, recruiters and hiring managers focus on years of experience when it comes to assessing candidates. And then do you have any advice for people in this position on how to build up that experience? It's this kind of vicious circle of you need experience to get a job, but how do you get a job without that experience? So, yeah, Ben, I'll pass it to you first.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's like you said, sort of experience begets more experience. So I think having done a consultancy with organization like Devex is a great start. In terms of looking for opportunities, going back to previous question, I think it makes sense to say, okay, what did I do in this first consultancy? What are the skills I can highlight from that, or what was the specific sector I worked in, and how can I then focus on opportunities that are similar to that, especially if I don't have a very extensive resume, that it will come across to those individuals with similar job openings that you may be a qualified candidate. So really focusing on opportunities that are similar to where you already have experience. And then once you have a little bit more of a body of work, then you can try and focus on finding opportunities that are more aligned with your long-term interests. So I don't have much to say beyond that than to just keep trying. It's not always a easy industry to break into, but hopefully with a little bit more luck, you'll find some related opportunities. Sorry, I don't have much more than that.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, so this next question is asking if there are different skill sets required for working in M&E or impact evaluation in different regions. So Ben, I know that you've worked in a couple of different regions. Maybe you can talk a bit about the different skills that you needed there. Perhaps there were more in the way of soft skills. And then, Shubha, I wondered if the MPH, does that focus on any kind of different skills or different areas of work in different regions? So Ben, if I can kick it back to you again.
Yeah, so I would say it doesn't vary as much by geography as it does by sector and type of work. So when working in a specific sector, working in public health, for instance, and Shubha can better speak to this than I, there's going to be specific skills and specific ways of doing things that are the industry standard in that sector. So how people approach statistical analysis in public health using mainly epidemiological frameworks is going to be different than how M&E practitioners generally approach research in a vocational training project using a more statistics and economics oriented framework. They're related, but they are a bit different. And then the second dimension is what is the type of work you're actually doing. If you're running an experiment, it can be very important to have the skills of being able to manage a data collection team. So being familiar with something like Open Data Kit or Survey CTO or one of the other products on the market that allow for surveying in areas that have low internet bandwidth. There's potentially, if you're doing more qualitative work, that's a different toolkit. So I wouldn't say it varies as much by geography. On the geographic side, it's, of course, like language skills are immensely helpful. If you're working in an area that you don't speak the language, you have to have collaborators that do. But yeah, that's what I would say there.
Okay, and yeah, Shubha, have you any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree with what Ben said. I don't think I have much more to add there.
Okay. So this looks like it might be our final question for today. We actually had a webinar yesterday on how to learn soft skills, but it was something you both mentioned earlier, the need for good communication and presentation skills. And I think, Ben, you had mentioned sometimes you're talking to different audiences, to donors or governments, for example. So perhaps you could both just share some advice for how a professional can actually go about developing these skills, and particularly in how they can adapt their presentation and their style to suit the different audiences that they might have to collaborate and present in front of. Shubha, shall we start with you this time?
Sure. Really, it comes down to practice. I mean, the more you work with different people, the more you're going to get used to what are the most effective ways to communicate with the various groups. So not being shy as far as it's difficult. I personally am a shy person myself, but you got to put yourself out there and be willing to get up in front of a group. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. I don't know what else to say beyond that.
That's great. Ben, maybe you can talk a bit about how someone could adapt their material or their way of presenting depending on the audience that they're speaking to.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add to what Shubha said, which I very much agree with. I would just say that in addition to the practice, it's very important to have someone that can give you feedback along the way. Ideally, you have a manager or a peer that already has some experience doing this type of work, and they can, at the end of a meeting, informally give you feedback on, okay, yeah, so it looks like that slide worked, and that way of explaining X concept worked, but we might want to try this other part differently the next time because the client seemed confused by it. And just having someone to talk through that process with and give quick feedback after the fact, I think is a really helpful way in to really refine these skills. And something we really focus on at ID Insight. So as a part of our professional development process for everyone in the organization, we have both continuous feedback, and then as well as every 6 months, there's a 360-degree review employees go through against a rubric that evaluates both the quantitative skills, but also some of these soft skills and the ability to communicate with clients. So I think setting aside a formal time to speak with peers, speak with your supervisor on how to get better at this is also really important.
Great. And if I could, I would just add in one final question for today. Someone is writing and asking that, well, they have to do a lot of online training of trainers, and they're wondering if you have any advice for preparation or modes or techniques that you might have used when working with your own team or being involved in training. Ben, do you have any thoughts on this?
I'll start by saying good luck. It's quite difficult to do training online. But yeah, it really depends on like how technical the training is and the experience level that the trainees will be coming in with. So I'd have to have a little bit more information for that. I'd say the most critical thing is making sure there's some kind of test for competency and how much the information was retained, maybe if not right after the fact, maybe a week or so later, if possible, because in person it can be much easier to get a sense pretty informally of how much information from a training someone has retained. But when you're not in the same room with someone, it's much harder. So before you roll out the program of wherever the people being trained are going, I would highly recommend doing some piloting to really try and measure the competency and how much of the material the people being trained remotely have retained. It's something we do at ID Insight when we're doing surveys, even when we're doing the training in person. And I think it would be even more important when you're doing it in a remote training setup.
Sure, that's great. And Shubha, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, actually, so we've done a lot of online education, obviously through our online master program in public health at USC. And one of the things that we've done is work very closely with instructional designers on developing the online training because you want it to be effective. And again, as I mentioned previously, there's all ranges of online education, and you want to make sure that you're designing the education with the audience in mind and with adult learning techniques in mind particularly. So if you can work with an instructional designer, great. If not, as far as preparation, if you can take a couple of courses or trainings around instructional design, that could be really helpful. I believe lynda.com has trainings, and also getting familiar with some of the creative applications, through Adobe and others, to make sure that the training, again, is interactive, it's engaging. You don't want it to be boring, and it's really a different animal, frankly, online training and education. So I would recommend, from a preparation perspective, learn about instructional design and creative ways to engage, particularly with the adult mind.
Great, thank you for those insights. So I am afraid we're actually out of time for today. That's the hour up. So thank you for everyone who tuned in. and for sending in all your questions. And I am sorry if we weren't able to answer them all today. However, do remember to check out the Skills for Tomorrow page, where you can find a lot of great advice on building your expertise in different areas of development and advice for keeping up with the sector's changing talent demands. Shubha and Ben, a huge thank you to you both for joining us and for helping answer all our audience career questions. It was great having you with us today. And finally, thank you again to everyone who joined us from around the world, and we hope to see you in another Devex online event soon.
Great, thanks so much.
Yep, thanks everyone, and feel free to reach out online. You see our website in case you have any questions that we didn't get to that I could help answer. Feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah, and if anyone is interested in applying to ID Insight, unfortunately we just closed our annual recruitment drive for entry-level positions, but keep an eye on that. In 6 to 9 months that will be back open, and then for mid-level to more senior-level positions, those positions we hire on a rolling basis. So www.idinsight.org/careers, and we hope to have you apply. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.